We're okay now? We're okay now. Welcome to this EU Today conference. We're going to be talking about something which is very, very important to all of us at this particular moment, no matter who we are, where we're from, and that's Europe's defense. Europe's defense in the context of a war in Europe with Russia, in the context of a growing war in Israel, in the context of North Korean troops moving into European territory, in the context of Taiwan being threatened. These are very, very dangerous times. Donald Trump has added to the equation by getting himself re-elected as president, and he has made it very, very clear, that he expects Europe to take responsibility for its own defenses, something that I personally would agree with. We're joined today by Askold Lozynskyj, who is an American Ukrainian, a regular contributor, a very valuable contributor to EU Today, who recently published a very, very powerful critique. In fact, he preempted Donald Trump on this, a powerful critique of Europe's inability or unwillingness to pay for itself. Askold, we'd like to welcome you. I know you.
Thanks very much.
Askold, very briefly, before I introduce our colleague Dmytro Shrukro, I'll introduce him properly. After you have addressed the issue, Dmytro is very, very well placed to give his opinion on this, and I can strongly suspect that he's very sympathetic to you. Askold, please tell us, what is Europe doing wrong, and why is Europe doing it so wrong on defense?
Well, Europe has its own problems, but given the fact that Donald Trump was elected and Donald Trump has been harping on this idea that Europe has to carry its load, that is going to be the most important reason that he will suggest that America will not contribute to Ukraine's defense. My position is predicated on the fact that Ukraine is, frankly speaking, in Europe. There is no danger to the United States other than the danger that is posed by Russia to the European countries, including countries that were once part of the satellites or even part of the USSR. And Europe is going to have to step up. My understanding is that out of the 31 or so NATO countries, 23 of them have reached so far the 2% of GDP barrier, and the idea is to increase that to 3%. Now, Europe is not a poor country, not a poor continent. Europe is Germany, in fact, is an interesting country because it has the third largest economy in the world. And they're going to have to step up if you want. Donald Trump has to be, I hate to use this word, appeased, because he's not a friend of anybody. He's a friend of Donald Trump. And as a result, if he wants to make sure that everybody's carrying their fair share, then that's what they're going to have to accommodate him. Now, I understand that Europe has problems, particularly in Germany, because the coalition is suddenly broken. But frankly, they have to step up, and Germany certainly can step up. They were talking about halving their budget for defense, and that's not a good idea. So now I was not an American voter, but I was not a Trump supporter. But given the fact of what we have, and what we have is that Donald Trump controls, and I mean Donald Trump controls all three branches of government. He controls the judiciary because he's made more appointments than anybody else to the Supreme Court. He's made an awful lot of appointments during his first term to the district courts and the circuit courts. He also controls, well, we don't have the final results on the House, but on the Senate side, he controls the Republicans. These are not Republicans. These are Donald Trump Republicans. And he has miraculously done this because, frankly, I think since Ronald Reagan, no Republican has won the popular vote, and he's won it by, I believe, some 5 million. So we have to appease him by, and the avenue of appeasement is by working on his demands and his narcissism, because that's an important element of his character. Some people were saying that he is now appointing his cabinet, and who's going to be in his cabinet. Frankly speaking, it doesn't matter, because look at what happened in his first term. Almost all, or at least more than 50% of his cabinet have voted against him in the 2024 election. He has influence over his cabinet only because he is Donald Trump and he was elected president, and he can hire and he can fire. So that's basically my position. Can you still hear me, or am I off?
Absolutely, absolutely. Dmytro Shrukro, you are the European correspondent for Ukrinform, the major Ukrainian news agency. You are also a guy with a military background. We've known each other for many, many years, and we've often talked about these defense issues. When we first got to know each other and we started to talk about these things, we couldn't have foreseen the situation that we find ourselves in today. As a Ukrainian, as a journalist, as an ex-military guy, how do you see this? I mean, because we have to see things from the European perspective, from the Ukrainian perspective, but also from the American perspective. We find ourselves in a mess, and we find ourselves in the hands of the man who is going to control the purse strings in about 3 months' time.
Look, first of all, the situation is not new. We already faced these some kind of efforts from the Trump administration during his previous term, when he very hardly push European allies to raise the defense expenditures, so that we can expect continuation of these policies. But before the coming to the depths of this issue, I want to say that it is a great pleasure for me and a great honor to share a conversation with Mr. Askold Lozynskyj, because I would not be mistaken if to say that he is some kind of legendary person, and in Ukraine. And I want to say that all Ukrainians and myself, of course, we appreciate very much the Ukraine World Congress for assistance to Ukraine in that difficult times. And you see, I expect very interesting conversation today. So coming back to the issue, I see the two points in that regard. As I'm, as you mentioned, European correspondent, let us speak a little bit about European position. So far, just yesterday, during the informal summit of EU, which was held in Budapest, European leaders very clear stated that we are trying now to speak with future new administration, with President-elect Trump, and to convince him that the European security and, for instance, Indo-Pacific security are very deeply interlinked, and there is some reason, especially the Korean troops appeared in Ukraine. So that's kind of, very, how to say, unexpected from one hand, and from one hand it's a very unprecedented development we have all faced now. That means that the dictatorship and those authoritarian regimes, they are directly interfering into the matters not only in Europe, but they also influence to the global security. If we consider that Russia will pay for that assistance with transferring some kind of the missile and maybe nuclear technologies to North Korea, this is, I believe, the West dream for American side also, including the new administration of President Trump. So that situation is quite difficult. And as we see, the conflict in Ukraine is not a Ukrainian conflict. I insist, it is not even the war between the Russia and Ukraine. This is a global issue which could lead to quite difficult circumstances. This is concerning about the position of America and future American administration concerning the European contribution to the European defense. And by the way, Europeans understand very good and very well that they need to invest more in their own defense. And as Mr. Lozynskyj mentioned, 23 against the 3 countries before the war now increase their defense expenditures more than 2%. And many of them increase even more than 3%. For instance, take an example of Poland. Take an example of the Baltic states. And you see, this is quite a phenomenon, because the frontline states increasing their expenditures don't even not looking to the any demands from a NATO side. They understand that that is important for their own security. And that exactly lead me to my second point. If these countries are increasing their defense expenditures, that means that they suspect that in the nearest future, the role NATO playing in their security would decrease, especially if a new American administration would have some kind of uncertain position concerning the assistance to Europe for protecting their own security. That's understandable that there should be, how to say, fair share of the expenditures in that regard. But still, you see, we always say that Euro-Atlantic area as such is something whole, and it is very difficult to divide that area between, for instance, America and Europe. So my second issue is that such development, if, for instance, there will be some kind of ignorance of European or self-isolation of United States in the nearest future, it will be very damaging to the transatlantic unity. And that is extremely important issue from my perspective, because right now we consider NATO like the main pillar of both U.S. and European deterrence and defense. What happens if there will be less solidarity, or if some countries in Europe will decide to go to that kind of strategic autonomy they're speaking so loudly now? You see, we are speaking now about trust. There should be a very clear position, including from the Trump administration. I will stop here because I want to listen Mr. Lozynskyj's opinion about all these issues. We will speak about Ukraine and the Ukrainian war, of course, but let us do it a little bit later.
I think one point that I'd like to make, because you Dmytro touched upon Europe again, and poor investment. Just one example: Belgium. You and I, Dmytro, both live in Belgium. No longer has any armored vehicles. It no longer has any tracked vehicles. Belgium is basically, the Belgian army is now a fairly heavily armed police force. It's an internal police force. It's there to protect the establishment. It has some aging F-16s and nothing more to say for it, really, and a couple of Corvettes. I'm not sure what percentage Belgium spends of GDP on defence. It's probably less than 2%. There have always been 1 or 2 NATO members dragging their feet, but it now seems they're all dragging their feet. Even, I'm embarrassed to say, Britain is dragging its feet. Lots of money is spent, but it's not spent on equipment. It's not spent on research and technology. It's not spent on manpower. It's spent on administration. And we have a Labour government now, so we can expect that to get worse. you can see where the Americans are coming from here, can't you? Askold, can you please be perfectly blunt? I know you're a very straight-speaking gentleman. If you could really tell it to the European governments now, what would you say to them?
Well, what Dmytro said is absolutely correct, except that it would be applicable only if Donald Trump was a rational human being. And he's not.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is concerned with one thing. He's concerned with Donald Trump, his finances, and so forth. He doesn't treat Kim Jong-un as an enemy. The only reason why he treats Xi from China as an enemy is because they have the world's second largest economy. And that's why he plans to put huge tariffs, which is going to destroy the American automobile industry. So the reason why I mentioned what I did is that Donald Trump his motto, if you know who his mentor was, it was an attorney by the name of Roy Cohen. And he's predicated his life on Roy Cohen's. The dicta here is win, win, win. Never, never give up. All right. Never admit to being wrong. Okay. So in this case, what he needs is if Europe comes up with the money, in other words, the other countries, let's say the other 8 countries or so that are not complying with their defense requirements, then only then will Donald Trump become a normal human being. You won't be able to address him because he will justify every negative response with the fact that Europe has to pay its fair share. So we haven't reached the 3% barrier. We're currently at the 2% barrier, and Donald Trump has to feel like he's won. And if all the countries in Europe start paying the 2%, Donald Trump will say, "This was my idea." If you watched him during the campaign, he often said, "This is what I've been saying for many, many," even though it has nothing to do with reality. You know, we are we are in a bad situation. Donald Trump is not conducive to being a leader of world politics, but he wants to be, so he has to be led and controlled, but he has to have the feeling that he's doing the leading and the controlling. He's like a little child, but a bad little child, a bad child, but you can't spank him because that's just not going to work. So you have to give him all the toys that he wants. And then because he controls the world's largest economy, then maybe, he will work with the rest of the world.
Do you think, Askold, that the situation would have been any better if Kamala Harris had won this election?
Oh, sure. No comparison because we already had the Biden-Harris administration on the hook for aid to Ukraine. There were two problems. There was a limitation on the range of the weapons that they were delivering. They were dilatory in delivering, and the NATO issue. But Trump's proposal, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it. Trump's proposal doesn't differ very much from Putin's proposal, except that he says that a 20-year ceasefire, Russia retains the territory, which is 20% of Ukraine, and Ukraine will defer from joining NATO for a period of 20 years. Okay?
Yeah.
This war, if Ukraine does not join NATO, there is no way for Ukraine to win this war. There's no way. And the fact of the matter is that if Russia gets rewarded for bad behavior, and that's precisely what it's done, bad behavior, then it will move on. Why not? Why not? Estonia, the Baltic states, what's the big deal? These countries, they have less than, well, maybe a little bit more than Belgium now, but they're arming themselves, but that's going nowhere with Russia. So we have to make we have to I hate to use that word, appease
Hmm.
Donald Trump's infantile character.
Yeah, any historian would point back to the 1930s and say that, as we know, appeasement doesn't work. Particularly, I would argue, when we're talking about Russians. Anybody who's had a lot of dealing with Russians will know these expressions. You said A, now you must say B. You gave me A, now you must give me B. What's ours is ours, what's yours is negotiable. And Putin really epitomizes all of those horrible traits about the Russian personality, doesn't he? Dmytro and I were talking a while ago. George W. Bush, having met Putin, said, "When I sat and talked to him, I looked in his eyes and I saw his soul." Well, I don't know what he saw, but
American politics has been appeasement since Second World War. But I'm not talking about appeasing Putin, because he's a bully. The more you give him, the more he wants. But I'm talking about a child, essentially, who's got no political savviness, because he's never been in politics. He was a businessman, period. Okay. And that's how he needs to win. And he's not going to be a friend of Putin forever. As soon as there's some type of a rift, he can become Putin's worst enemy, because of the narcissism, the fact that he wants to be number one. And unfortunately, I hate to say this, but we have to play up to that, because he's going to be president for 4 years unless he dies. But then JD Vance is even worse. I mean, I have to pray every day for good health for Donald Trump, because JD Vance would be even worse for Ukraine. And irrespective, I'm going to just repeat this one more time. Irrespective of who is his Secretary of State, who is in his cabinet, these people are irrelevant. The person who's going to have the most influence on Donald Trump is the last person that spoke with him and told him how great he is.
Dmytro, as a Ukrainian, you know the Russian mindset far better than most of us. If you were to be advising the European Commission now, and here we're assuming that the European Commission listened to advice, okay, that may be a rather optimistic assumption. What would you be advising the European Commission? What are they doing wrong? Why do they seem unable to even get Putin's attention?
Look, it is not about European Commission, because right from my point of view right now, EU doing absolutely right things. They trying to ramp up their military production. They try to to address the fragmentation of the defense and security sector. And this is quite a challenging task if we considering that we are speaking about some kind of unification of the armed forces of 27 different states. Still, that is a big problem. So that I would not be not brave enough but smart enough to give them some kind of advices, because they know what to do and they moving into the right direction. What is the problem? That they cannot do and fulfill all these ideas during a night. So that it will take time and investment and additional efforts. And so right now they're speaking about the strategic autonomy inside the EU, and EU armed forces should be enforced not to make alternative to NATO, but to reinforce the European pillar of alliance strongly. So that I would not give the advice to European leaders, but I am dare to give advice for some future American leadership. Because, we have no such a privilege like Mr. Lozynskyj have. I'm not an American citizen, so I could not be such critical to the president elected. But that's for sure that the position which he expressed earlier, as well as the position of his potential Vice President Vance, they are a matter of concern in wide public in Ukraine. And I can explain you why. Because future President Trump promised to finish that war in 24 hours. And, that is, how to say, it is maybe quite irresponsible statement from the pure diplomatical point of view, because in any kind of diplomacy, if somebody establishing some kind of threshold for himself, he is weakening his own position. And right now, Donald Trump administration have only two choices. First choice is to force Putin to stop war. It is unlikely, from my perspective, because we still face the Russian blackmailing the entire world with a new world war with nuclear weapons. And the second option is for new Trump administration to ask Putin for peace. And that is exactly the way to lose the game. He will not win this game, because the Putin will never say definitely yes, but he will never say definitely no. He will, bite the American position by the pieces. He will first try to gain some kind of fruits, like some kind of ceasefire. After that, he will demand to withdraw all the Ukrainian troops from entire territory of Donbass, which was not captured by Ukrainian troops. But you know what? Putin could do everything he wants, but we need to consider the factor of Ukrainian people. Ukrainians will never, ever accept such kind of surrender, because that is exactly the position of surrender. But who is, Mr. Trump, to force Ukraine to surrender? I can say you, as Ukrainian, whatever new American administration think about that, will they continue the military assistance to Ukraine, or we will stop it? Or maybe there will be some kind of tide of that kind of assistance. It will not stop a war, because Ukrainians will rather die than to go to under the Russian occupation. Because we see what Russians are doing right now in our country. They did not come to our country to change our mindset. They came to our country to kill us, because they know for sure that even if they defeat the armed forces, Ukrainian armed forces, the fight will not be over, because the Ukrainian population will overturn to guerrilla war against the Russian occupiers. And that war will be absolutely endless and very lethal for all of them. So whatever Mr. New American administration thinking about that, the solution and position which was expressed by new American administration will not lead to peace, and will be very damaging, not only for Euro-Atlantic security and integrity of NATO, but also for American position in the world. So because Trump will lose this game, and that will mean the absolutely horrible humiliation of America as a great state. And I respect very much great American people, and I don't wish them to come through that kind of humiliation. That's my point.
I'd like to really just finish with one question, Askold, which I'd like to address to you. Yeah, Trump and his "I will end the war within 24 hours." Well, that was never really explained, and it's not been repeated. To my knowledge, he's not actually repeated that one since he was re-elected. Does he actually have a plan?
No, and I'm sure of that. He was specifically asked what is the first thing that he's going to do when he becomes president, and he said that he's going to start deporting people from the United States, those who came in illegally. He doesn't have any plan for Ukraine, but his so-called advisors have essentially iterated reiterated what Putin had said, with the exception of UN forces in a buffer zone. Okay, but the only uh, caveat that I have here, and I agree 100% with what Dmytro said. Ukrainian people will never go for this. I've been to Ukraine 10 times during the war. I've been to Ukraine 100 times since independence, and I know what the Ukrainian people. But Zelensky is a smart cookie. He telephoned President Trump at 3 a.m. on the date of the election. He congratulated him. He told him what a great meeting they had at Mar-a-Lago. The meeting they had at Mar-a-Lago was awful. It was awful. But Zelensky is a player. Okay, he's an actor. He's a player, and that's what you need with Donald Trump. We do not need him to be on our side. We need for him to think that he's leading us and everybody else, but accepting our positions. And our position is no unconditional surrender. Russia has to withdraw from Ukrainian territory, and Ukraine has to join NATO. Okay, but that's at the end of the spectrum. Okay, we need Trump to support that idea, and he may support that idea because the only thing that I from this conversation, you are treating Trump as a rational human being, and he's not. You have to understand that you're dealing with, he's a bit of a bully, a thug, a sex maniac. He's the most immoral person in the world. Yet he said that when the assassination attempts proved to him that God kept him as a vessel to make America great. He's never seen the inside of a church. Okay? So you can't believe what Trump is saying. He has to be led. I think that Ukraine is fortunate that we have a smart or clever president. Okay, because we can't simply tell Trump, okay, we don't need you. We're on our own. Okay, we need to get him to commit to Ukraine and believe that that's his idea. Okay, I'm not saying this is easy. I'm saying this is very difficult, but listen, I was violently opposed to him as during the I've never voted for him. But we have today we have he was elected. He controls all three branches of government. So we have to deal with him. And even killing him is not an option
No.
because JD Vance is just as bad or worse. So we have to find a way to manipulate him. Okay, that's basically what I'm suggesting.
You lost me? Hello.
Gary, are you there?
I'm here, Gary. Gary, have we lost you?
He's frozen. So why don't Dmytro just speak?
Yeah, I just want to agree with you 100%, but we need to find a way to speak with the new American administration. I mean, Ukraine and its leadership. And I absolutely agree with President Zelensky. Choose absolutely right tactics in trying to find a way to convince President Trump in necessity to maintain the support for Ukraine. And you know that out of the questions that we need to respect the choice of American people who elected President Donald Trump as president-elected. So my next point is that, okay, we can maybe consider some kind of individual characters of Mr. Trump, but if he's a businessman, let us put that kind of relations on absolutely business footage. For instance, if we are speaking about the NATO membership for Ukraine, let us speak what happened and what will be losses and wins if Ukraine will join or will not join NATO. Because we cannot now expect that US and Europe simply come to the status quo, even if they consider that there will be no further assistance to Ukraine and Ukraine will be left to its own fate. Because as you know for sure, Minister of Foreign Affairs Lavrov, he already mentioned that after situation in Ukraine is solved, he proposed to return to the Russian proposals which were made like before the war in December 2021. If you remember, it was like NATO needed to withdraw to the borders of 1997. That means to withdraw all the troops from the new member NATO countries. Another question is how acceptable that position is for NATO and, of course, for the United States. That means that the US, who are loyal partner and ally for other NATO countries, as I believe and trust, they will need to react somehow on that kind of the development. And that means that the next target for Russians will not be Ukraine. Maybe it will be Moldova, but more presumably it will be like one of the Baltic states. And another question, will NATO allies be ready to answer the simple questions? Are they ready to die for Narva? This is absolutely ancient question, but still, you see, there is no way out of this question. Because already now, if we are speaking about Article 5, there is some doubts how the NATO countries will react. I understand that now NATO officials absolutely bravely stated that we are going to defend every inch of NATO territory. But my question is pretty simple. Why to defend that inch of NATO territory in Baltic states, which could be destroyed by one shot of the Russian missiles? Why not to defend the NATO interest right now and in Ukraine, in supporting Ukraine? Then Ukrainian soldiers are fighting, not NATO soldiers are fighting. So there is no, again, it is quite a logical business approach. That means that any kind of assistance which United States will provide for Ukraine now, it would be much more cheaper if it will be needed to react on the some kind of military aggression of Russia in the nearest future, especially if Ukraine will fall. Of course, Ukrainians will not give up, but they could simply finish. I mean, finish like people.
Dmytro, Askold, I want to thank you both for taking part this evening. It's been a very important discussion, and I think that it's very important that we speak openly. Sometimes our words may appear harsh. We may think, can I say this? Can I not say this? Well, actually, I don't think we should be afraid. We are actually facing a third world war at the moment. And if we go back a couple of years to when we started to postulate on this, we're a lot closer than we were a couple of years ago. A lot more countries involved, a lot more fronts opening up. And actually, Askold, you're absolutely correct. To use a metaphor, Europe needs to get its bloody finger out, and it needs to do it very quickly, doesn't it?
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
gents.
Dmytro. Thank you, Gary.
It
We'll
was a
be in
I
pleasure.
touch.
apologize for the bad connection. We're kind of surrounded by mountains here, and it's not always the best internet. But anyway,
It's
thank you very
beautiful.
much.
It's a beautiful landscape.
Oh, it's Spain. It's all beautiful in Spain.
Oh,
Absolutely.
you're in Spain. You are. Yeah. Actually, I
Okay.
love all of Spain except for Madrid.
Well, this is Cadaqués. So this is, you know, a
I like
beautiful.
Valencia, Murcia, all of those regions.
Well, Valencia is just up the road from here, actually, and this looks very peaceful now. But yesterday morning, you will have seen all the flooding and everything in Valencia. Yesterday morning, we had it just over here. I went to the patisserie to get some cakes, and there were like cars that have been brought down the river, and trees, and goodness knows what. And it was not an easy morning for the people of Cadaqués
great.
yesterday, I can tell you. Global
Okay,
warming.
thank you very much, because I got to run. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
Пане Дмитро,
Bye-bye.
все найкраще. Дякую.
Дякую
Bye,
вам.
Gary.
Speak
На все добре.